Something that's been on my mind is AI religions. And before we get started, I want to define what do I mean by a religion, because religion is a deeply, deeply loaded word. Now, throughout this video, I'm not going to name specific names because that will just distract from the point. But I'm going to give you a few examples, but mostly I'm going to focus on the characteristics, the patterns, and that sort of thing. And so that way you can kind of have a more abstract view of what I'm talking about. So when we talk about a religion, there's a few characteristics that in the AI space that really truly fit. And I think that it fits better than things, than other words like maybe a cult or whatever else. So first, religions tend to be faith-based, meaning you believe in something without evidence, such as you believe that you know how this will play out despite evidence against how things are going. Next is prophecies and prophets. So you have scriptures, you have doctrines that say this is how it's going to play out. Everyone must read these prophecies and pay fealty to specific prophets. Again, if you know, you know. There's scriptures, there's dogma, there's doctrine. So basically, there's what's called costly signaling, where it's like, oh, have you read the sequences? If you haven't read the sequences, you haven't actually been fully indoctrinated. That's literally the word indoctrin. So there's a level of indoctrination. You have to watch the right videos, read the right books, read the right blog posts, and you have to speak in a certain way to show that you belong to that group. That is a form of costly signaling. Next is it's a community. It's an online community, but it's an online community where there is definitely in-group and out-group identities. And then finally, there's a moral, ethical, and imperative set of judgments associated with these groups. So what I mean by moral judgment is you might say, oh, well, humanity is irredeemably is screwed because of our own faults and foibles, because we cannot coordinate, or because we're putting our worst demons into the machine. There's an ethical and imperative judgment as well, because it says shut everything down, otherwise it'll kill everyone. That kind of thing. So those 5 kind of overarching characteristics, to me, very much look like a religion. Now, I need to add the qualifier. I have never engaged in religious studies other than, what people tend to when you're a millennial on the internet and you look at the atheism versus religion debate. So this is my personal take. I said it looks like a religion to me. So when I say it looks like a religion, what am I talking about? Like, what is the specific cluster of AI religions? I will say that there's a few different ones. There's like the salvation fantasy, like hype bro, where it's like AI is going to come in and it's going to change everything and it's going to fix everything. And I have made some of those videos in the past. I've never really believed in it, but the reason that I made those videos is because they sell really well. Now I'm trying something new where I'm going to be a little bit more sober and a little bit more kind of thoughtful about it. Now, I am still of the opinion that technology is generally a very, very good thing. Technology does create new problems for humanity, but, on balance, you say, okay, well, if you could erase technology to solve those problems, would you do that? Nobody would make that choice. Almost everyone would rather deal with the problems that technology brings, because it's a double-edged sword, right? So, anyways, so that's one end. What I really want to focus on, though, is the secular eschatology end of it. And that's a mouthful. If you haven't heard this term, secular means that it is not holy, basically. Secular means that it is not sacred, right? But I will say that it is secular only in the view that it is not specifically Christian or Muslim or Jewish or Buddhist. To the true believers, I think that it is sacred. There are sacred ideals, there are sacred beliefs and sacred values that they have. And then the other part of that is the eschatology. So eschatology is stuff like Revelations or Ragnarok. It's a myth about the end of times. So what many commenters call this kind of AI religion, the doomerism, is a secular eschatology. So it is a quasi-religious, or in my view, it's becoming an actual religion that includes a few characteristics. So some of the characteristics of a secular eschatology is that it is concerned with the end of days or a final judgment. And so when you look at some people who talk about, oh, we need to build a worthy successor, or, it's 12 months until we're all invariably screwed, and if anyone builds it, everyone dies, right? That very kind of apocalyptic, fire and brimstone kind of approach. It's very, very close to a religion. Then another component of this secular eschatology is that there is a chosen few, or a few prophets or people that are deigned or destined to be the warnings, the messengers. So you have these apostles, these chosen few who know what's coming, and it is upon them to try and save humanity or warn them of doom and save yourself and prepare for the end. It's a lot of these people, they're basically just crazy people holding up signs and shouting the end is nigh. There's not a whole lot of difference psychologically or behaviorally. The one big difference is they wrap it in a veneer of logic and reason. Although when you look very closely at when you have a real scientist or a real philosopher or a real expert in information theory look at their quote unquote research, I had one friend who was curious about all this stuff, and she said it's all just very circular logic. So it's like, yes, their logic is very self-referential, very insular. They don't engage in stuff like falsifiability, Occam's razor, Socratic dialogue. It's just like, but I have this preconceived notion. Don't confuse me with the facts, which is, again, a very religious kind of take. Characteristic 3 of a secular eschatology, or any eschatology, is apocalyptic imagery. They have very vivid descriptions as to what will go wrong and how it will go bad. They'll say it'll take over the government. Look at the AI 2027 paper. It'll take over the government and then launch the nukes. Or there is going to be the treacherous turn, where it's going to pretend for years and years and years over many iterations that it's friendly and aligned, but then one day it'll just wake up and choose violence. And another thing, a big reason that I call it specifically faith-based is because most of the people saying this are not technical. They don't have any education or experience that would give them true insight. Now, you might say there's a few people that do have some technical experience, that have a PhD in machine learning or have actually programmed some of these things. But even still, that's a jumping off point. No one has a crystal ball, so put it that way. And when you actually look at the rate of success, the hit rate for their predictions, for the predictions that they do make that are falsifiable, it's pretty low. Some of the guys that were involved in AI 2027, one of the things that they used to frame their work was that they have a really good track record at predicting the future. But I actually looked into it. I actually looked into how accurate were they. And so a few criteria came up. One, their predictions were only good for about 12 to 18 months into the future, a couple of hits at the 3-year mark. But then also their hits were only really good on information-saturated topics. And so what an information-saturated topic is, meaning there's a huge amount of OSINT out on there on the internet, so open source intelligence on the internet. Anytime they deviated from that, their hit rate went to less than 20%. But these people don't update their priors about their own accuracy. So anyways, that was a little bit of a side tangent. Characteristic number 4 is possible salvation. So when you talk about a possible salvation or a salvation fantasy, you're looking at something like a rapture, or we can avert disaster, but only if the forces of good versus evil array correctly, and we alert the masses, and we perform the correct rituals. And in this case, those rituals focus around stop research, align superintelligence, get the correct policies, and those sorts of things. And then if and only if you follow my instructions and you do things correctly, then we might salvage humanity. Otherwise, it's all is doom. And then the final characteristic that I'm going to talk about, there's about a dozen characteristics, but I'm kind of simplifying it to what I feel like are the most salient ones. So the 5th characteristic of the secular eschatology is the ticking clock, or a sense of urgency. We must act now because doom is imminent. Now, what I will point out is that some of the people on the AI doomer spectrum very deliberately avoid making specific falsifiable claims. And now this is something that grifters have done for many, many centuries, is you say, it's going to happen. I don't know exactly when, but it's soon, it's soon, it's soon. Because the moment that you give a specific date, the moment that you say it's going to happen in 2038, then people are going to be looking, the countdown clock has started, and then you might be proven wrong. So when people avoid, when they make vague claims like, we need to build a worthy successor. Okay, where's your data? Where's your evidence? Where's your theory? When is it going to happen? How do we build this? Then they shrivel on the vine. If you say, when is this treacherous turn going to happen? Well, I don't know. I'm not going to talk about that, but the treacherous turn is going to happen because I used my imagination. So then, finally, I want to talk about a couple of other things just on the faith-based spectrum and how it actually, to me, seems to map onto other religions. So first, I already mentioned that many of the people spouting this doctrine, this dogma, and building these communities are not technical. The vast majority of AI doomers, particularly some of the loudest ones, do not have a shred of credible technical experience with artificial intelligence or with computers in general. So when they make assertions about how computers will evolve and the capabilities that these machines will have, they don't even know how to program a router or a firewall. They've never even been in a data center or built a server, let alone studied complex systems or machine learning. So it's very, very faith-based. It's, I'm going to project onto this Rorschach test everything that I think is wrong with humanity or myself or whatever else is going on. It's a lot of projection and displacement, in my psychological opinion. Next is, they don't really have any evidence. When you really press the doomers or people that are engaging in these AI-based religions, when you say, what evidence do you have that AI has some of these characteristics? It's like, is there any evidence of AI going rogue? Is it killing people? Is it threatening people? Is there any instance that when you actually look at it, meets any of the criteria of what you're looking for? If it's not emerging now, then you're speculating. So basically the kind of the trap that I said is, okay, either what you're talking about applies to the technology we're developing today, that if you say we're on the path to general intelligence and superintelligence, all of your predictions have fallen apart on the technology that, excuse me, that exists today, or you're making predictions about a technology that doesn't exist at all. Both of those are kind of crazy. So there's no evidence. And that goes back to the strong assertions about the future and the nobody has a crystal ball fallacy. And so anytime someone says, I know with utmost certainty that this event will happen at some point in the future, even if they say it's not, I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, or here's a litany of different specific prophecies, the treacherous turn or worthy successor or whatever. And I'm picking on those two because to me, those are kind of the two most ridiculous faith-based articles. And then finally, a refusal to update their beliefs when confronted with contravening facts or evidence. Particularly if you go back and say, look, in 2020, you said this, and we had 3 years. That 3 years has come and gone. For instance, when Max Tegmark launched his Pause AI letter, we have 2 years. That time frame has come and gone, and if anything, the AI has gotten safer in that period of time. There's more benchmarks about safety. There's more alignment protocols. And one thing that really kind of gets under my skin, this is another tangent, is that some of the loudest cheerleaders of these AI religions say no one is doing any alignment research. And they tell their flock, because it is a flock, they tell their flock alignment research isn't being done whatsoever. And then they believe that. The faithful believe that. They say, you said this thing is true. And I remember I confronted one of them. Again, I'm not going to name names, but it's a big one of the rising ones. And I said, look at literally the mountain of research in AI alignment that is going on. And he literally said, I kid you not, he said, I don't read that stuff because I don't understand it. And I'm like, then why are you saying that alignment research isn't being done? That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. And so finally, where I'll end this video is this, to me, very, very this is my personal opinion, due of nothing else. I don't think anyone else on earth has said this other than maybe my wife, because we were talking about it. But the entire moral stance of these AI religious types is very Augustinian. So Saint Augustine, in the Catholic tradition, one of the core values that he had in his writing is that mankind is irredeemable without a higher power. And I actually got the idea to go in this direction because I was reading Hyperion. Now, Hyperion has, if you're not familiar, it's a science fiction novel. It came out in the early 90s. It was very much in the wave of like AI is going to kill everyone. And so there's without spoilers, too many spoilers, the Shrike in that book was made by AI to scare humanity into ultimately getting them into a war. Another book that I read that has a very similar kind of religious undertone was Shadow of the Torturer. And Shadow of the Torturer one, I will admit, it's very well written. The book was ultimately not for me. But the entire book was inspired by the Catholic faith and the Augustinian view that humans are irredeemable without a higher power. And the main character is a completely irredeemable doofus. And ultimately, it turns out that he is being led by a higher power in the future. And what it really, like, those two books, when you look at those and then you look at the way that things are going right now, at least the way that these faith-based communities tend to look at how AI is playing out or how they want AI to play out, it very much looks like they have a similar narrative of humans are fundamentally corrupt and we're fundamentally broken and we cannot save ourselves. We need a higher power to save us. We need to be redeemed by the digital god that we are building. But that digital god, that monstrous child, as some people are saying now, might grow up and decide that we are unworthy. And so it is all very fundamentally about our mythic place in the cosmos. It is fundamentally about what is our relationship with the divine and the archetypes of the terrible father and the terrible mother, the great mother. Is that what we're giving birth to? Something that will supplant and take the place of our failed parents and our failed society and our degenerate state? Will it come and finally bring order to chaos like the Borg? So that's what I see in the discourse about AI gloom and doom. I have seen it for a while. I've written about this for a while. But it seems like this is going to be with us for a while. And when I say for a while, I mean, I think that this is a permanent condition where even in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, I suspect there's going to be, and I really wish this wasn't true because I thought that this was going to have its day in the sun, its 15 minutes of fame, and then go away. But it looks like AI religions are here to stay, for better or worse. They're going to evolve just like all movements do. They are going to change and have different permutations, because in the marketplace of ideas, the mind virus of that dogma, of that doctrine, of people who want that cognitive closure, who want the certainty of knowing what's going to happen, even if it's wrong, they cannot tolerate ambiguity or nuance. And so I think that there's always going to be people, unfortunately, there's always going to be people who will cling to these charismatic prophets, this dogma, this doctrine. And of course, then basically what they say on Twitter is people with low cogsec, so that's cognitive security, don't realize that these stories are actually engineered to hijack your limbic system. They're engineered to hijack your prefrontal cortex to say, forget your critical judgment, pay attention to your fear, your anxiety, your sense of insecurity. Those are real. And the fact that you feel depressed and anxious about this means that the threat is also real. But anxiety is not a good epistemic grounding. So with all that being said, thanks for watching to the end. That is my take for the day, and have a good one. Cheers.